Five Rings Illustrated. This is part 2. I think it's the Book of Water we're on, right? Gotta figure out where the heck I'm at. There we are. The Scroll of Water. The essence of Niten Ichiru roots itself in water, which is why I record the Ichiryu way to wield a sword as the Scroll of Water. It is difficult to explain the intricacies of this path exactly as they are in my head, but even if my words are not enough to explain it, sufficient contemplation should give you an intuitive understanding. Every word, every phrase in this book requires careful reflection and consideration. Inconsistent thought will result in misled notions about the way of the warrior. Although the principles I write about for victory in the strategic way are for battles between individuals, it is important to also perceive them on a larger scale and understand their use in battles between thousands. This path is finicky, in that even a slight misjudgment will lead you in the wrong direction and onto a contrary, tangential path. You will not be able to understand the way of the warrior by simply reading this text. Take all of the concepts recorded in this work as though they are written explicitly for you. Do not think to just glance over them. Do not think to simply learn nor copy them. Rather, believe that they are concepts flowing from your own heart that you are striving to embody with your complete dedication. The mindset of the strategic way. Those upon the path of the strategic way must maintain a stable mindset, one that remains unchanged from day to day. In both everyday life and in strategic training, your mindset must remain steady. Keep an open and directed mind, free of tension, yet not at all lax. Keep your mind from wandering. Keep it centered, but keep it calm and flexible. This is something you must contemplate carefully, so that your mind can go with the flow rather than be swept away by it. The mind should not idle in times of tranquility, nor should it rush, no matter how fast things move. The mind should not be subservient to the body, and the body should not be subservient to the mind. Give thought to the movement of the mind, but do not obsess over the movement of the body. Your mind should be insufficient. Your mind should not be insufficient, but equally should not be a drop in excess. Even if your surface thoughts are not behind iron defenses, make sure your innermost thoughts are protected from people who might try to see through you. A smaller person must keep in mind that which is larger than themselves, and a larger person that which is smaller. And it is important for both large and small people to remain impassive, making sure they are not trickled or tricked into thinking with preconceived notions of the implications of size. Keep your mind clear and open, and you will have plenty of space for all your knowledge. Polishing both mind and wisdom is of utmost importance. Enriching your wisdom will enable you to discern between the logical and illogical aspects in this world, and know what is right and wrong. Follow the paths of every art far and wide, and eventually you will become undeceivable by anyone that walks the earth. Then and only then will the first real understanding of the way of the warrior bloom in you. Wisdom in the way of the warrior is distinctive. On the battlefield, when you are engaged in 1,000 things at once, remember to concentrate on the principles of the strategic way and find the immovable mindset within you. One's bearing in the strategic way. Your posture is important. Face straight ahead, without tilting or leaning your face to the side. There should be composure in your eyes, but do not wrinkle your forehead. Furrow your brow slightly and keep your eyes steady, unblinking and slightly narrowed, with a wide view of your surroundings. Think of holding your head high, with your chin sticking out slightly. Keep your neck straight and strong. Shoulders down and back. Imagine your body as one line from the shoulders down, keeping that back straight and the pelvis tucked in. Stand strong. Through the knees and feet, keeping your stomach tense to stop your lower back from arching. The final piece that brings it together is the wakizashi. Sheath the sword and keeping it pressed against your stomach. Make sure that your belt is not slack. This is called tying the linchpin. As a general rule for good posture, according to the way of the warrior, it is important to make your everyday bearing your battle posture, and your battle posture should become your everyday bearing. Keep this in mind. One's gaze into the strategic way. Your gaze should reach far and wide. Looking and seeing are two different things. The gaze that sees is intense, whereas the gaze that looks is soft. Being able to see distant things as if they were close, and close things as though they were far away, is the essence of the strategic way. What I mean by this is that you should know exactly where the enemy's tachi is, but not spare even a glance to look at it. This is essential in combat, and you must strive for this ability. Whether the battle is one-on-one or a full-out pitched battle of many people, your gaze should be the same. Watching is in your peripheral vision, without moving your eyes. To look to the either side is critical. This is not something that can be done suddenly in the heat of battle. This is something you must work on constantly to make sure that you always remember what is written in the scroll and are able to maintain the same gaze at all times, no matter what happens. To grip the tachi, hold it very lightly with your thumb and forefinger, and with your middle finger neither tight nor loose. Finally, your ring and little fingers should close tightly upon the hilt. A slack hand is unacceptable. The tachi is for cutting down your opponent, and you must wield the sword accordingly. As you cut your opponent, your grip should not change on the hilt, and your hand should not tense up. The only thing that should change slightly as you slap, parry, or press the enemy's sword is your thumb and forefinger. Regardless, you should still wield the sword with the intent to cut. This does not change whatever the reason you hold the sword, be it a test of swing of a new blade, a strategic cut, or a killing blow. A rigid hand or a rigid sword is inadmissible. A rigid hand is a dead hand. A fluid hand is alive with motion. Take this to heart. Footwork. When moving your feet, stay light on your toes and press strongly through your heels. Depending on the circumstances, you might use big or small, fast or slow steps, but you should always walk as normal. The three movements known as jumping feet, floating feet, and heavy feet are terrible for footwork. Instead, yin and yang footwork is important upon this path. But I mean never moving just one foot at a time when you're cutting, pulling back, or parrying. Move your feet as yin and yang, right and left, right and left. There should never be a time when you move just one foot. This is something you must deliberate. The 5 stances. The 5 ways to stand are high stance, middle stance, low stance, left stance, left side stance, and right side stance. Even though the stances are classified in 5 ways, they are all for the purpose of cutting an opponent. They are only these 5 stances. But every single one should be in your mind for cutting, not posing. Assuming a broad and narrow stance is dependent on the circumstances, and whether it will be to your advantage. The high, middle, and low stances are the basic positions, while the left and right side stances are for more applied situations, such as when the ceiling overhead or your flank are obstructed. Use of the left side stance and the right side stance should be judged according to the battlefield. You must understand that on this path, the middle stance is the most important. It is the cornerstone, the foundation of all stances. If you observe the strategic way as a whole, you can clearly see that middle stance is the army general, and 4 remaining stances follow the general's leads. Always keep this in mind. The sword's true path. Truly understanding the way of the Tachi means knowing the path that your constant companion takes through the air, and knowing it well enough that you can swing it freely, even if you hold it in just 2 fingers. Trying to swing the Tachi too fast will make it harder to wield properly along the path it should take. Instead, swing the Tachi with composure, so that it is effortless to wield. You cannot swing the sword along the correct path if you brandish it frantically, as you might a folding fan or a dagger. Doing so is known as stabbing like a sewing machine, and will not work for actually cutting someone with the Tachi. After you swing a downward blow, raise the sword back up along the same path. When swinging sideways, return the sword along the same horizontal. In essence, use the full length of your arm for a heavy swing. That is the way of Tachi. If you master the 5 extrinsic forms of the Ichiryu school, the swing of your sword will effortlessly flow and follow the path it is designed to take. Train with persistence. The 5 extrinsic sword forms. Number 1. Middle stance is the foremost stance. From this stance, meet your opponent with your sword tips already in their face, ready to deflect the oncoming attack to the right, with your sword riding on top of theirs. When your opponent comes in for a second attack, retaliate with a downward blow of your blade to knock their sword down and keep it there. If they attack a third time, strike at their arms from below. This is the first form. It is difficult to comprehend the 5 forms just from what I write here. These 5 extrinsic sword forms are recorded so that you may take up your Tachi and train to swing it along the path. With these 5 forms, you will come to understand your sword's trajectory and be able to predict any and all incoming attacks from your opponent. Niten Ichiryu has no other forms than these 5, and you must build experience in each of them. Number 2. High stance is the second of stances. Just as your opponent comes in for the attack, strike with a blow from high stance. Keep your sword on top of the enemy's deflected blade, unless they attempt another attack, in which case you can sweep your blade upwards. It is the same no matter how many times they attempt their attack. The 5 forms each have their own mentalities and rhythms. If you build up experience Niten Ichiryu with the 5 sword forms, you will understand the path of your sword so intimately that you will make no blunders and you will come out victorious no matter what situation you find yourself in. Building on your experience is imperative. The third of the stances assumes the low stance, with your swords pointing down and your spirit grounded. When the enemy comes in to attack, swipe upwards towards their hands. If the enemy attempts to strike again after your upward swipe, keep the same rhythm by striking at them once more, cutting across their upper arms with a horizontal swing. However, from low stance, you should aim to stop the enemy's blade with one strike. Wielding your tachi along its rightful path in a low stance allows the user to adapt to the opponent's movements, whether they are fast or slow. Take your sword in hand and experience this for yourself. In the fourth stance, begin with the swords at your left side. Strike at your opponent's hands from below as they reach forward to attack you. If the enemy makes an attempt to knock your upswinging blades down, concentrate on cutting their hands and continue your swing along its path. Diagonally upwards to above your own soldiers. This is the path of the tachi. If the enemy comes in for another attack, use the correct trajectory of the sword to be in the winning position. This warrants deep consideration. In the fifth stance, begin the swords held horizontally at your right side. Parry the enemy's incoming attack and bring your tachi diagonally up the transition to high stance from low stance. Follow through with a straight cut downwards. This is fundamental for understanding the path of the tachi. By becoming familiar with swinging your sword in the fundamental stances, you will be able to wield the heavy tachi with incredible freedom. I won't go into great detail about the 5 extrinsic sword forms in writing. However, you should know that through an all-consuming dedication to practice of the 5 sword forms, you will gain an understanding of sword work of Nichiren Ichido, and the ability to embody the ensemble of rhythms and read the movements of your opponent's sword. Whether you might come up against you are guaranteed victory in battle by honing your skills with an infinite amount of sword training, preempting anything your opponent might try, and keeping tempo with various rhythms. Research and reflect upon this. The stanceless stance teaching. What I mean by this is that these positions for wielding your sword should not be defined, lest we fixate on them. But nevertheless, those are the 5 ways to hold the sword that I define as stances. The way you wield your sword depends on the opponent, the place, the circumstances, and even the direction your enemy chooses to face. But you always wield it so that it is easy to cut down the enemy. Sometimes in high stance you'll have the mind to come down into the middle stance, and when the moment strikes, it might be beneficial to shift back up into high stance. From low stance, you might have the chance to come up from middle stance. Even in that side stances, the situation might call for you to bring your swords to the center, bringing you back to middle or low stance. Because of this fluidity, my principle is that there are stances, but no defined stance. If you have taken up your sword, whatever comes next, you are ready to cut your opponents. You must be absolutely ready to fill every enemy, whether you parry, slap, hit, press, or just lightly tap the sword brandished in your face. If you concentrate on merely parrying your opponent's sword or just slapping it, hitting, pressing, or tapping it, you have forgone the ability to cut your enemy. No matter what movement you perform, it is essential that you regard everything you do as solely for the purpose of cutting your opponent. Think carefully on this. The placements of troops in the battle is equivalent to a stance, and all stances are a formation by which to win a battle. It is not good to get set in your ways, fixating on any one formation you know well. It is not good to get set in your ways, fixating on any one formation you know well. Take this into consideration. Striking your opponent in a single beat. To strike your opponent in a single beat, you must move into striking distance before your opponent even registers your imminent attack. The single beat strike is so fast and true that you reveal no movement and your mind works on instinct. Striking before your enemy has the chance to decide whether they will draw their swords, dodge, or attack is the essence of a single beat strike. Once you have built the muscle memory for this, you can work on training yourself to take advantage of the offbeats and strikes at speeds in the pauses of between rhythms. The double beat rhythm. The double beat is to be used to outmaneuver your opponent's hasty parry of or retreat from your attack. Start with a feinted strike, and once your opponent feels secure in their parry or dodge or feint, catch them off guard with another strike. This constitutes the rhythm of the double beat. It will almost be impossible to pull this off after merely reading the theory. But if you take your sword in hand and receive proper training, you will swiftly appreciate the idea. In moments, being unconscious, unpredictable. In moments when you strike at the same time as your opponent, your conscious body and mind take over. And they know is that they have hit the enemy. Your hands will strike of their own accord with power and rapidity that can only come from this ability called unconscious, unpredictable strike. And it is incredibly important. This strike can be used against your opponent many times. Build this into your muscle memory, embody it, and continue to build upon it. The flowing water strike. Use this strike when you are face to face with the opponent you are fighting, and they attempt to quickly retreat. Dodge and disengage from your opponent from your sword. Allow your body and spirit to swell, moving as slowly and steadily as stagnated water. Your sword should follow your body in a large and powerful strike. With sufficient training, this is simple yet effective. It requires thorough scrutiny of the enemy's posture. Opportunity strikes. When you unleash an attack and the enemy attempts to block or deflect it, use the opportunity to cut their head, hands, and legs in one strike. Striking at everything along a single tachi pathway is what I call opportunity strikes. It is best to practice this thoroughly, as it has countless practical applications against your enemy. You should learn this through innumerable repetitions in combat. Striking flint and steel. When your sword is locked with your enemy's blade, strike as hard and as fast as you would a flint and steel without raising your tachi, even the slightest amount. Engage your legs, torso, and arms in unison to strike in a flash. This move is difficult to pull off without repeated practice. Keep working on it to increase the speed of the strike. Autumn Leaf Strike. This move is designed to disarm your opponent with your strike, their sword falling to the ground. As your opponent assumes a stance to strike, slap, or parry you, counter with a powerful, unconscious, unpredictable strike, or flint and steel. Strike your opponent's tachi, force the point of your blade down, and keep pressing the opponent's sword with your mental and physical might, and they will eventually drop their weapon. With training, striking down the enemy's sword and making it fall from their grasp is easily done. Make sure to train well. body over sword. This is also known as sword over body. Usually when taking position to strike your opponent, you do not move your sword and body at the same time. Depending on your opponent's intent, you can take up a striking position with your body first, and the sword will follow a land below. Occasionally, there might be times where you strike with the sword first, without facing your enemy, but as a rule, the body moves to strike first, and the sword follows through after. Think about this carefully as you learn to strike. The strike and the hit. To strike and to hit are two different things. Having the mind to strike means to follow through completely with the blow, no matter the form. A hit, on the other hand, is similar to having a mind to test the waters. No matter how hard you hit, or even if the opponent dies, it is still just a hit. A strike blow that only comes from the mindset to follow through. Explore the differences. To hit the arms or legs of the enemy is just the first steps. It should be followed by a critical strike. To hit equivalent to merely touching. With training, you will come to see that striking is fundamentally different. Think this over carefully. Embodiment of the autumn monkey. To embody the autumn monkey means to adopt a form whereby you keep your arms close to your body. Think of nothing other than keeping your arms in when you advance into the enemy's space. Before your enemy attacks, get into their space as swiftly as you can and stay there. If you extend your arms, your body will be lagging behind. So instead, you want to be in the mindset of moving your entire body as fast as you can. Getting within the arm's length makes it much easier to swoop in on the enemy. Consider this carefully. Embodiment of lacquer and glue. The nature of the lacquer and glue idea is to stick closely to the enemy that they can't shake you. Stay so close to them that they cover you, that you cover them, head to toe, and are practically inseparable. People tend to move first with their head or legs, leaving their body to lag behind. Make sure to attach yourself to the enemy so closely there isn't any space between you. This bears thinking about closely. Measure height. Whether the situation you are within arm's length of the enemy, when you are in arm's length within an enemy, you must take care to make your stature greater than theirs. Lay thin through the legs, elongate your spine, crack your neck, and stand strong, face to face with your opponent. It is imperative that you stand tall, stretching so much that you tower over the enemy. Think about this well. Adhering blades. When your opponent strikes and you strike at the same time, if your opponent parries, encroach on their space with a mind to bind your itachi together. Push into their space with just enough calm determination to keep the swords together firmly, but not with too much power. Once you have bound your sword to the opponent's, you can enter their space without the need to rush. There's adhering and there's entangling. Adhering is a strong move, but getting entangled is weak. You should know the difference. Body slamming. When you've got into the enemy's space, use the body slam to smash them with your whole weight. Turn your head to the side slightly and slam your left shoulder into the enemy's chest. Use the full strength of your body to smash into them, moving to the rhythm as if exchanging blows, ready to rebound off the impact. If you practice getting into your opponent's space, you can knock them flying 10 or 20 feet, possibly enough to kill them. Build your strength in this and train hard. The 3 parries. There are 3 kinds of parry. The first is to parry the enemy's tachi as it comes towards you when you advance. Deflect the enemy's tachi over your right shoulder and stab the other sword towards their eye. Second, while stabbing in the direction of your enemy's right eye, repel their sword by following with yours towards their neck. Third, advance upon the enemy's space with your sword leading, all but ignoring the long tachi that you parry. Think of the follow-through with the sword in your left hand as a punch to the face. These are the 3 parries. Think of making a fist, hitting their face with a left-handed punch. Drill this continually for experience. Stabbing the face. An important thing to always have in mind is that when engaged in a fight, you should be aiming to stab the opponent's face, their mask that they wear, with the tip of your sword. If you are committed to stabbing them in the face, your enemy will be forced to duck and withdraw. When your enemy is on the retreat, you will see numerous openings for a winning thrust. Think this over. If you can see an opening as your enemy evades during the fight, you have already won. Never forget to stab at the face. You must build experience in this as you train in the way of the warrior. Stabbing the chest. You can stab the enemy in the chest when the environment of your fight is restricted overhead, or the sides are blocked, making it difficult to the cut. To deflect your opponent's sword, face the blunt of your blade to the opponent and making sure your sword is not slanted. Thrust the tip towards the chest. Make use of this technique when you are tired, or when your blade is blunter than it should be. Run this technique through repeatedly. The lash slash, stab and cut. Use the lash slash riposte when your opponent attempts a counterattack. After you have advanced on them, forcing them into retreat, raise your sword from below as if to stab them, and then charge. Change your thrust to a strike. Keep doing this to the rhythm. A snappy lash, slash, thrust, an upward lash, strike, a cutting slash. This back and forth beat can be used in any battle, no matter the circumstances. Find your lash slash rhythm, but setting your mind on stabbing the enemy with the point of your sword, and then striking them using the momentum created by raising the sword. Practice this even as you consider it. The parrying sword smack. This technique is to be used when you find yourself engaged in a stalemate of clashing swords. Interrupt the enemy strike with a slap of your tachi, maybe a slap to the face, followed by a strike. The interrupting slap does not need great force, but nor should it be able to be simply parried. Smack the enemy's oncoming tachi with yours and follow with an instantaneous strike. Taking the initiative on the parrying smack and keeping it for the strike is crucial. If you can keep to the beat of this technique, your sword will stay steady in your hand as you fend off any strike from your opponent, no matter how powerful. With just a slight smack, consider this and drill it well. Engaging multiple opponents. When you are faced with multiple enemies at once, draw both your tachi and wakizashi and take broad side-to-side stances with your sword. out as if to fling them left and right. If the enemy comes at you from 4 directions, push them back towards one. When they come at you, discern the order of their advance and deal with the closest first. Keep a broad view of your surroundings, and when you know where your opponents will strike from, swing both swords simultaneously, cutting the enemy in the front as you strike out and felling those at the sides as you return your blades. Do not wait between swings. Immediately resume your broad stance and cut into the advancing sides. Tear through the enemy and keep charging towards their position, cutting them down as you move. Find a way to force the enemy into a single file. As soon as they are lined up, like a string of freshly caught fish, slice into them without missing a beat. Recklessly clashing and chasing after smaller groups will work against you. Furthermore, knowing where the enemy will come from, but waiting for them to come for you, will also work against you. Victory comes from moving to the enemy's rhythm and knowing their breaking points. When you can train by gathering together multiple opponents and forcing them back, once you get the hang of it, dispatching 1, 10, or even 20 enemies will become easy. Investigate this. Reiterative training. The principles of engagement. Victory in a sword fight is attained by adhering to the principles of engagement. I cannot record every painstaking detail. It is up to you to learn what it takes to win through discipline and practice. The overall truth of the way of the warrior is revealed in sword technique, and the details can only be taught in person. A single blow. This single blow is the way to undeniable victory. However, it is impossible to grasp the concept without meticulous study of the strategic way. But train diligently to strike down your enemy in one blow, and you will find yourself attuned with the way of the warrior, freely able to realize the path to victory. You absolutely must hone your skills in this technique. A direct connection to the deepest level of teaching, is what I conveyed to someone who is fully on the true path of Nichiren Ichido. Temper your body through training to forge true mastery in the Nichiren Ichido strategic way of the warrior. This is important. Other details must be taught to you orally. What I have recorded above amounts to the main substance of my school. To learn how to win, once you have taken your sword in arms against someone, the first things you must learn are the 5 stances with their 5 extrinsic forms. Once you also grasp the sword's true path, your movement will be unhindered, and your dynamics will be second nature. You will learn to feel the rhythm in striking, and your competency in sword technique will become ingrained. As you start being able to move your legs and body in exactly the way you intend, you will defeat 1 person, 2 people, and eventually come to understand strengths and weaknesses and strategy. Study the articles of the scroll one by one as you take in opponents and gradually get to grips with the principles for victory. Set your heart on lifelong discipline and endless patience, seeking actual experience in the field that will teach you the virtue of it all. Engage any and all kinds of people, and learn their minds. Walk the 1,000-mile path, one step at a time. The way of the warrior requires unhurried and composed thinking in order to forge an understanding of the path. Become attached to the strategic way as the samurais call it. Today's victory is being better than you of yesterday. Tomorrow's victory is conquering your weakness, and building on your strength is your victory for the future. Keep in mind everything written in this work, and do not let your mind wander off course even slightly, even if you win against the most formidable enemy. But you do so by defying the teachings. You are not following the true strategic way of the warrior. The knowledge to defeat tens of men by yourself comes for incorporating the principles for victory in all that you do. The power and wisdom you accrue in your sword work will make way for mastery of the strategic way in an all-out battles to come or one-on-one combat. Forged over 1,000 days of training, sharpened over 10,000 more, and you are close to be called tempered. Scrutinize these words. That's it for the book of the Scroll of Water. I hope you enjoyed. Mouse is more